Christy J with Stitch in Heaven. We are so excited to welcome you to week 2 of Schoolhouse Dash. Last week we did the basic non-patch. This week we're doing a little variation on it. It is actually the non-patch chain block. One thing, we got a little challenge going here, making it a little more challenging for you. Still going to be easy and super fun. But your squares in the non-patch are not the same size. So it kind of just adds a little bit extra element of fun and an element of challenge. So just know when you're cutting those, your squares are not going to be square. They're actually going to be 1.75 inches by 2 inches on the side. So they'll vary just a little bit, so make sure that you watch the pattern. The pattern is posted in this Facebook group. It's going to be an exciting week. So be sure also to post your homework in the album here on Facebook. And we're going to draw for prizes as well. So don't forget to post your homework. And everybody wants to see your blocks. I want to see your blocks for sure. But let us know if you have questions. And without further ado, Miss Mitzi Redd.
Okay, so next up, we're going to do the 9-patch chain block. So very similar to the 9-patch block that's already been completed. The only difference is instead of having a solid piece, we're going to have an actual smaller 9-patch within the 9-patch. So it's going to make that real pretty chain that goes across it. It's a fun block to do, but we want to make sure you're paying very close attention to your cutting. And this is where cutting becomes very important. You'll see that they're not all the same size in that smaller 9-patch. And so we want to make sure that you're paying attention to that, watching that. The directions in here are great, and the diagrams. So just be sure to pay close attention as it's going together, because it's really easy to get it mixed up or maybe one piece out of place and then going, well, how'd that happen? How'd it go wrong? Trust me, ask how I know. So I've gone ahead and laid out on my Martelli rotating mat here. I've got my 9 pieces, which again is going to be 5 of the Island Batiks parchment and 4 of the white. So I've got my pieces already laid out, and I'm going to start putting those together the exact same way I put the last 9-patch together. So it's still very easy, very simple process, and I'm just going to get them all laid out and going. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting them together. Again, you're going to use that 1/4 inch foot and seam allowance. You know, having a good 1/4 inch foot on your machine makes a huge difference in your quilting and getting your consistency down. So if you don't already have one, definitely reach out and find out which one you need and get it for your machine, because it will make a big difference when it comes to putting together blocks. You're going to see a lot better consistency along the way. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and finish putting these together. All right, and there's the first 2 sections of my 3 rows for my smaller 9 patches. And then I'm going to go ahead and press these, because like I mentioned, I do like to press a bunch as I go. And what I'm going to do is give a little heat there to press on those seams. What I'm doing is setting my seams, and then I will go ahead and do the press to the dark side again. So I'm going to start with that one. I'm going to just lay it over. I'm going to give it a little bit of steam in there. Doesn't need a whole lot. Okay, do the same over here. Just enough to give it some firmness and make sure that seam is good. And one more. Again, press into the dark side. Just a little bit going in. Now I'm using my Laura Star iron for this, and I love it. So when you hear the noise like that, it's just my Laura Star keeping that heat going. So now I'm going to go ahead and add those final pieces going in and make those nice little 1/4 inch seams. We're going to have that parchment in the center of that one. And again, you'll notice I'm not using pins for this part. I'm working with some pretty small pieces. So I'd have to stop, take the pins out, and I just find it easier for me personally to just go ahead and stitch this part of it without pins. But again, if you need pins, go for it. Nothing wrong with that. Go ahead and cut my threads, trim my threads out here. Let's do a little bit more heat. So we go ahead and press those seams open. Again, I press the whole way through all of this. And I'm just going to put some heat in my seams, set my seams, lay that back. A little bit of steam, not much needed. Do the same over here. And I can put that heat and the pressure on either side of the fabric, the right or the wrong. It all works out the same. Just be sure you're being consistent with, you're always like pressing to the dark side because it's going to come in handy as we get to making these 9 patches. That way all those fabrics really block up and butt up together. So I will go ahead and use a couple of pins here because what I'm doing is I am taking the 2 pieces, the two of the rows that go together, so it would be like my top and my center. Go ahead and pin those together. And I'm just putting my pin right down that seam line, right where those edges are going to butt right up together. Super easy to do, real fast. Back underneath here for a 1/4 inch to go with on the seam allowance. Always going to be a 1/4 inch for us. I'm going to stop, pull my pin, make sure everything is still really good lined up, and go ahead and finish that off. There we go. Give that a quick press. And fold out. I really think when you put that heat onto that seam first and kind of set your seam, I think it does a really great job of making it easier to fold over and lock it in a nice straight line. All right, last part is going to go on now. You heard my iron there, my Lara Star. It's just go ahead and letting us know that it's staying, keeping and holding the heat, and it's got the steam ready for me. So I'm going to put this last in. Again, I'm just going to pin right there on those. So what I'm doing is where I'm butting those seams up, it's just going to put that pin right in there to hold it so that when I begin and end my stitching, it's going to have those seams nice and tightly put together. And stop to pull it out and finish through. Go ahead and cut those. Let me tuck my pins away. One more press. And we've got that smaller 9 patch already completed then. Now I'm going to go ahead and give that, like I said, a little bit of steam. You see it definitely coming out a little bit more. Love that. Gives a lot of nice, good steam out of there and really puts it through. We laugh because you can also get a good facial out of it sometimes too. So what you've got then that you've come up with made is you've got 3 of these smaller 9 patches. So you're going to need all 3 of those for each one of these blocks. Now with a 9 patch chain, you're going to see that's the block that is here. And there's another one right down here. So it's going to be 2 total blocks for the quilt. And you're going to need to make sure that, again, with it, watch your seams and your allowances and stay really good on that 1/4 inch. Because especially when you're working with these smaller pieces, it can get really easy to kind of get off on your 1/4 inch. And what it will do is it'll make the whole rest of the block kind of get thrown off. So let's go ahead and finish one of these. And so for the rest of it on your larger solid pieces, so we're going to start out with the smaller 9 patch first. And they go one kind of in that diagonal. That's what makes that chain. Okay. And then I've got the white that's going to go around that center. So you're going to have 4 of your whites and 2 more of those parchments. Okay, so it's all going to line up the same. Now from here, it's working exactly the same as that prior 9 patch did because we've got the same size blocks. If you're concerned that your blocks are a little bit wonky, go ahead and check them. Make sure they are evening up on the same size as your solid pieces because you definitely don't want to be off size and then, you know, a little bit of trouble trying to get everything lined up and together. So I'm going to go ahead and start stitching these down. And there is the first row, the first 2 of the first row. All right, this one is going to be row 2, which is going to have my smaller chain 9 patch in the center. Again, I'm not using pins on the smaller piece, but if you feel like you need to, absolutely go ahead and do it. Nothing wrong with that. And then another solid, or two solids, the parchment and the white. I love how soft these colors are, especially when you look at popping it off against all the turquoise and the blues back there. It's just gorgeous how those colors lined up. Okay, go ahead and trim those. Slide this back out of my way. I'm gonna go ahead and give these a press. Again, I am gonna go to the dark side, so I'm gonna be pressing away from the white. If at all possible, you know, I don't want my seams to show through on that white. Sometimes there's gonna be moments that there's just no getting through, you know, with that. It's just gonna happen, and that's okay. But if I can possibly prevent it, I'm gonna do my best to prevent it. So I'm gonna always press over to that dark. There's one. Now this one, when we look at it, and I'll show you this real quick as I'm getting to it, it's white, and then I have the multiple seams from that 9 patch. So this one I am gonna do a little different, and here's why. I am gonna go ahead and press to my white on this, because in a sense this would be like my dark, but I can make a smoother seam pressing over to the individual white fabric versus having to press over and pile up on top of all these extras. So that's where my exceptions do come in. You can go either way on that pressing. I have just found over the years I like doing that option better. And it's strictly because when it comes time to quilt this, I've got less bulk in that seam if I'm going onto like the single or individual piece of fabric versus going onto those multiple layers. So it'll make it a little different sometimes when, you know, when I was telling you to press the dark, this is kind of that exception to the rule. And take into consideration there are always exceptions to the rule. And the big thing is what's going to be the easiest for you and making sure you get really nice, good presses in your seams. Okay, so now that we got that, let's bring my top over. Go ahead and line these up one more time so I can make sure I am all good. All right, let's go ahead and put that third piece of each row in there now. Again, for this part, I'm not gonna go with pins. I will pin in just a minute when I start putting all these individual rows together to make the block, but I don't feel like I need it just yet. Okay, so there's one. Just line these up nice and snug. Row 2. Okay, and finally the third row. And we're just going to make sure we take our nice time, get really good straight on our seams, get all of those extra seams for making that smaller 9 patch. We'll make sure they all slide underneath our machine nice and smooth. Just helps to reduce the bulk is what we're looking for. Okay, let me trim those down. Next up, of course, we're going to press. And again, you're going to see now this one, I am going to go ahead and go towards that white. And like I said, the only reason I'm doing it in this particular block is I'm just trying to reduce my bulk. So when I come in and I start lining these seams up, we may not have the same butting up as I do on the other times that I was showing you. And that's okay. We just want to make sure we use a little bit of caution when we come across those. And take our time so that way they do go under your machine very smooth and easy and still makes a really nice clean finish for you. I know it may be going against some of the quilter rules that you've probably heard of by now, but you know, I always think here in my own studio I get to make my own rules up, right? So it's my quilt. I'll decide how it goes together. All right, so again, I'm going to line these right back up. I'll just leave it here on my pressing pad. Oh, I'm going the opposite direction. That's fine. And that. So I've got my parchments in the corners, and then across that diagonal, I've got my smaller 9 patches. So this is where I'm going to run into that some of them are not going to butt up together as far as in those seams on each row. And that's okay, because what I will do is I will just take my time going over them, make sure they're still laying nice and flat. It's just one of those things where I consider it just, it's better to do it that way just to reduce the iron in the seams. Now, if you want to stick with the whole press the dark, you know, like on this one, avoiding going to the white, perfectly fine. You just may have a little bit extra bulk there. Some advice I can give you would be to consider using like a heat press, or giving your iron a really good heavy press down. Again, don't pull, but give the iron a really good press down to help reduce your overall bulk. I love using a heat press, and mine is normally always in here in the studio going, so it really helps to reduce any bulk in those seams. So a heat press can be a really good option for you as well. It is not just for clothing, that is for sure. Us quilters definitely benefit from having a heat press around. But too, like where I was showing with my Larso iron, it gives a great, the iron itself is a really nice heavy weight, so it gives a really good weight, and then pushing that steam through can also help. So that's why it's beside me today. It takes up a little less space. All right, I'm gonna put the last row on here now. Again, if I can butt up those seams, I'm definitely going to, where I press the opposite direction on a few, it's all right. Just make sure it lines up really nice and cleanly. Now I'm only putting pins in at my seams just to hold them together, but if you feel for any reason you need to go ahead and put more in there, that's totally fine. Just put them where you need them. Because I will, as I come through, make sure everything is lined up and straight. So let's go ahead and put this final one in. And I'm going to take my time to make sure where I'm working with those smaller 9 patch, I want to be sure that I am just easily feeding those seams, you know, under my presser foot where they're laying down nice and smooth. I don't want them bulking up and you know, pushing too much in one direction. I'll pull my pin. And that's it. We are done. Last thing to do will be to go ahead and give them a quick press. Make sure you're nice and clean in there. I'm going to lay it over that direction. Now I'm just, like I said, giving a really good press into this, and making sure that those seams are really, really good and locked down. You'll see as I'm gliding across, I'm actually not using any pressure at all. So that's why when I say there's a whole difference between ironing and pressing, you know, our goal is to press. We want to really press those seams. Obviously I've got to glide my iron across there, but I don't want to put that pressure into it because I don't want to distort my fabric anyway. But here we go. That is your 9 patch chain block. So you've got your chain pieces going across on the diagonal. You've got your standard 9 patch and it's ready to go. You've got 2 of these blocks to make. Now remember I showed you on here, it's gonna go right here and there's another one right down here, so they all kind of go across from each other. But that is your next one. So easy to do, same simple steps as we did on the first 9 patch, but a whole nother block ready to go. So stay tuned, we got more coming.